on a cloudy day, when it's cold outside, I've got the month of May. Everybody say, I guess you say, what can make me feel this way? It's my girl, my girl. I'm talking about my girl, my girl. I've got
It is January the 27th, a Friday. And if it's a Friday, that was the week. I'm back with Keith Tier.
And that music just brings a smile to my face.
I know that music is good, especially and the people in it are good too. I think at some point, Keith, you're going to get sued.
Probably.
But
yeah.
until then, we'll use it. Finally, we're getting some truth from That Was the Week. We've been hearing for years, Keith, particularly from your wife, that unicorns are all the rage. They're breeding everywhere. Everywhere you look, unicorns are dropping off the trees of Silicon Valley, of San Francisco, and down in Palo Alto. Now we're getting to the truth. Unicorns are dying. I'm not sure they were ever really alive, but what's happening with unicorns this week?
Well, the truth, of course, is a moving ball.
Spoken as a true Man United supporter.
And as a dialectician, things change, and the change is super dramatic. I mean, huge in venture and in private.
Sorry to jump in, Keith, but hardly surprising. I mean, I've been waiting for this shoe to drop for months.
Well, that's the thing. You're like a clock that is right once a day, and it will eventually be true. And it is true. So basically,
so in other words, I'm a schmuck. I don't know what I'm talking about.
No, you're not a schmuck. A schmuck, to be specific, is not somebody I would have with me on the show. You are a curmudgeon, I would say, with a fixed point of view that gets challenged. And every now and then the world comes closer to your curmudgeon view, which is it all sucks.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's not hard to be skeptical of the mania for unicorns, these billion-dollar companies, these billion-dollar startups, which often, as you suggest, don't even have, let alone revenue. Some of them don't even have business models. I mean, it's back to the .com. It's back to tulips, digital tulips.
Yeah, well, it's asset buying. And when you're buying assets, there's always a risk that the price you pay is more than the price will be in the future.
To put it mildly.
It's true with houses, although less dramatic in the case.
Yeah, it's not true with houses, because when was the last time you paid $1 billion for a house that was actually worth $500?
Not me, but if you go to LA now in Beverly Hills, there are such stories. People in exuberant times overpay, and usually the owners can afford to lose the money, which is also true with unicorns, because the owners are very large venture funds typically, or even late stage private equity funds, so they can afford to lose the paper money that was previously there. But it does have consequences, because the whole venture ecosystem is a bit like a well-oiled machine. Things go in, it drives an engine. If things stop coming out, that's actually a major problem. It stalls the whole system for quite a long period of time.
And it takes, to extend that metaphor, there's a time period before stuff going in and stuff not coming out.
Yeah. There is, and we're now in the beginning, and I hesitate a little bit just to emphasize that point. The beginning of nothing's coming out, and what was set up to come out is now shrinking. That's the unicorn valuation story that my wife wrote for Crunchbase, which is very well researched, and also you say that even as a unbiased observer. It's interesting that you rely on Janae. You used to throw Janae under the bus a little bit, because she was always the one behind
the unicorn mania, but my guess is that you were the one. That Janae is much more hard-headed than you. Did she actually ever believe in this stuff?
I never asked her that question, but I mean,
You never asked her whether
one of her jobs is the unicorn leaderboard at Crunchbase, and of course, the unicorn leaderboard is a bit of a trailing indicator. It's what it looks back at what has happened. And all it really means is that company, somebody put money into that company, valuing it at $1 billion or more. And so it's just a factual leaderboard. It's not meant to be proselytizing.
I mean, looking back, Keith, do you think, and this isn't criticism of Janae or of Crunchbase or any of this other thing, but this mania with unicorns was a little childish, wasn't it?
You could say that the language is childish, but obviously, in any domain, you try to capture in ways normal people can understand, capture important things. And what actually happened, mainly after Steve Jobs invented the iPhone with his team, is the number of people on the earth that could engage with software and hardware grew massively into the billions. And the valuation of companies started to reflect the market opportunity, which was huge. And so people were saying, look, this thing could be worth 10 billion 10 years from now. So I'm totally happy to put in 100 million today at a tenth of that, which is a unicorn. And so money began to speculate on future outcomes. Now, fundamentally, the technology infrastructure is in a better place than ever before. The number of people that use it, the number of devices they buy, the number of software services they interact with is all growing. So what's changed isn't value or growth. What's changed is how much you're prepared to pay for it. And that's an investor decision. And it starts in Wall Street and trickles down. This is the trickle down effect, but it's negative.
So how's this? You do a good job in your firm of breaking stuff down and not speaking in generalities. How does the crisis in the unicorn market break down from sector to sector? I assume that crypto is pretty much dead. Every crypto unicorn now is being chopped up for canned cat food or something. But there are other sectors which I assume, especially AI, which is still very much alive.
Yeah, that's the interesting complexity of the whole thing. So crypto has got a double problem. It's got the general realignment of valuations, and on top of that, it's got the Bankman-Fried effect of assuming everybody's a scammer. So it's super hard.
Which isn't entirely untrue.
It's not entirely untrue, but it's largely untrue because not everyone in crypto is a scammer. Some people are evangelizing.
Some people are scammed, and
some people are scammed. And then there's the real people. There are real people, but sadly for them, it's pretty hard for them to appear real in this context. So crypto is in a way its own narrative. Then you've got AI, as you say, is flavor of the month. So the fact that we'll talk about this later, but Microsoft's what appears to be a $10 billion investment into OpenAI will not be the last large investment into nascent technology in the AI space.
Or the first, yeah. I mean, clearly.
Yeah. So there's going to be.
And what about other areas which seem a little bit more substantial, like biotech? I'm not sure how much Janae and the Crunchbase cover that.
Well, a lot of the venture ecosystem is biotech. If you look at the names, biotech is its own problem because biotech requires government authorization through the FDA almost always. And so the amount of money needed, it's a bit like semiconductors. You need a very large amount of money before you even know if there's a value going to be produced. So
this is it's all great news. I mean, you're always the sunniest of people, always seeing the things in terms of the glass being half full. But even I will acknowledge that this is good news for entrepreneurs because there's no better time to raise seed funding. You even have an article on this the now in the midst of all the doom and gloom?
Yeah, because only really good entrepreneurs with really strong ideas and teams will get funded, but they'll get funded in the context of less competition, less noise, if you like.
But isn't it also more true that it's in these periods that you don't have a lot of Me Too startups? I mean, the entrepreneurs like yourself who just do it, whatever the environment will do it, but everybody else gets a real job.
Yeah, everybody else gets a real job. I think that's true, unless they're in the midst of massive layoffs in tech, in which case they probably, I've always said to myself, Keith, you better have at least a 12-month buffer where you can survive if you're not getting any income, because the valley's like that. It goes through these periods where it's super hard for anything.
Do you think I did a show with Brad Feld who compared what we're going through now to the early 2000s? Is it comparable? My sense is it was a lot more dramatic with the crash of the dot-com crash.
I don't think so, actually. I think this is as bad as I've seen it.
Worse than were you at a company back then?
Oh, I lived through and survived the dot-com crisis and came out the other end. But it was, if I tell you the story of how I survived, it's a lot of things.
That's another show. So you really think this is worse? Why?
It's worse because the scale is much bigger. More people are affected. More companies will go out of business or be acqui-hired if they have good teams. The total amount of venture capital at risk is 10 to 20 times bigger than then. If you look at the paper value of the dying unicorns, so it's a big. It's almost like if the housing market crashed by 10x. You know,
and what shoe hasn't dropped yet, Keith? I mean, I still assume at some point that venture firms will start collapsing, even banks. I mean, at what point do we get to the end of this crisis? What hasn't happened?
So interesting. Silicon Valley Bank is thriving because its debt business is growing. And you can listen to its earnings reports and see its share price has been going up because its revenues have been going up. So banks actually do well in periods like this, as long as there is an end to the period. The biggest shoe to drop probably is the number of seed funds. At Signal Rank, we track about 1,200 companies that have done an A round, where that company has a very good prospect of becoming a unicorn.
Maybe you should rename Signal Rank, because do you remember back in the dot-com crash, there was the Fucked company, which did quite well. Maybe you should rename Signal Rank Fucked VCs.
Well, no, because, I know you're making a joke, so I'm going to ignore it. But let me come back to my main theme.
I wasn't a joke. That was a serious bit. That shows my skills as an entrepreneur.
So there's 6,500 investors in this 1,200 company list that we track. It's our pre-index, if you like. It's the feeder into the Signal Rank index, which are the B rounds that are really good. 6,500 investors. The top 200 are super strong. It's people like Dylan Field, the CEO of Figma, is one of them. And he's just obviously made a lot of money by selling to Adobe. So he's going nowhere. But below that top 200, there's well over 6,000 funds that you wonder how they're going to do the next fund. And that's where you'll see it. There'll be a concentration.
And is this the same theme that you and I have talked about endlessly on many different areas of the economy, the disappearance of the middle? There's always going to be a strong high end. There's always individual investors, but everything in between gets decimated. It's like retail. It's like media.
Yeah.
Like entertainment.
Except now there's a new part to that story. The middle was already getting decimated, but it was getting decimated due to a lot of very large check writers coming in later. and then going earlier, those check writers have disappeared now. They're not there. So actually, venture capital has to go back to its core, which is investing smallish amounts in good companies step by step as the companies grow. So it's true venture capital has to reemerge because the silly money is gone.
Yeah, so in a way, we're all coming to our senses. You referenced earlier Microsoft's investment in OpenAI, I think a $10 billion investment at a $20 billion valuation, has implications for the venture community, for AI, and also for Google. You have a couple of articles in the newsletter this week linking to this. What's your overall sense? What does it mean for Microsoft? What does it mean for Google? What does it mean for this sector of the economy?
Yeah, that's this story that's coming from Recode. Vox is the place she published it, which is part of that whole empire with Recode. And Sarah Morrison makes the point that Microsoft is making this investment not as a pure financial investment, but for what Microsoft gets out of it. And they're already starting to implement APIs on their Azure platform that allow any developer to build ChatGPT or any other OpenAI service into their software. So basically, OpenAI and its various products like ChatGPT is becoming a component of any application. So you can imagine things like a diagnostic doctor, where you tell it your symptoms and it gives a guess as to what your problem is, showing up inside software that is about before your visit to the doctor.
So this seems a very, very smart move, very well thought out. And if any company can pull this off, it's Microsoft. Is that fair?
I think it is fair. Microsoft has found its new core, and its new core is being the platform of choice for developers, especially in AI. It's been doing a lot of work in AI for about 5 years now, specifically for developers to access tools. And that means that Google Cloud, which is currently losing money, and even AWS are less attractive to product developers than Microsoft is. Now, that's a major shift. I remember if you went in to pitch a startup and you were using Microsoft as your infrastructure, there'd be almost zero chance of you getting an investment.
So is it says one of the conditions of the deal that Altman and his OpenAI people don't go to Google and Amazon and offer this also on their platforms?
Apparently not. Apparently that is not a requirement. But Google's super competitive, so I doubt they're going to want OpenAI now. They're going to try and build their own version of it. Amazon's a bit different. So we'll see. I think the biggest part of the deal is that 75% of OpenAI's revenue goes to Microsoft until a threshold is met of payback. And so Microsoft is not owning OpenAI, but it's behaving as if it did.
Yeah, and it seems like whenever Microsoft buys a company, you think of Skype or even LinkedIn. It doesn't seem particularly impressive, but this seems a much smarter, much more modern, much more innovative approach to acquisition or working with startup technologies and companies.
Yeah, I mean, Microsoft needs to get $1 billion of revenue from this partnership in order to justify the 10 billion.
And it doesn't even matter. I mean, how many billions has Microsoft spent wasted on Bing? I mean, at the very minimum, won't this reinvent Bing?
I think what will happen there, and this is more the dark side of Microsoft, is I think there'll be a lot of friction because I think there's a dogmatic belief that Bing can eventually succeed in competing with Google, and I think that's a mistaken belief. So it goes back to my old real names days. The reason that they discontinued real names is because they wanted to be a search engine, and they still want to be a search engine. Real names was a way not to be. ChatGPT is another way not to be a search engine. It's a way to be better than a search engine.
So how will it work for a developer wanting to build on Azure? They will have access to the Chat GPT. I mean, the current version is 3. The new one out this year will be 4. And will that again? What benefits does that give them? I mean, they could go straight to OpenAI. I did a show, for example, with Josh Browder, the Do Not Pay CEO, who's already working with them.
Well, it's more of a practical thing. When you write software, you use something called an IDE, which is a user interface for software development. And that IDE has access to libraries of code that do things. And you can pull in the libraries and write your code and run the code and see if it works. So a business relationship with OpenAI, or even having access to their APIs, which everyone can have, is one step less than having it built into your development interface and available in your natural programming environment. So I think it's just the last mile, if you like, of delivering OpenAI to developers is Microsoft, whereas OpenAI is the previous 100 miles. That's where the sweet spot is.
You also have an essay of the week, Google versus Chat GPT. What impact do you think this is going to have on Google? The alarm bells are going off in Google, but like Microsoft in the 90s, they're facing 2 challenges. One is this technological innovation. The other is suddenly the government's focusing on Google. They've got a Section 230 Supreme Court hearing in a couple of weeks. Now they're being sued by the government to split them up. So it seems as if history really is repeating itself in a very eerie way with Google.
Yeah. So this is a story really nicely written. It's by a guy who cooks pasta while it tells you a story. And it feeds off this Google is done meme that's going around, that's been around for quite a long time. And it makes the point that this is the first time when people said Google has a competitor where it's real. It's coming from Margins, which is like a Substack, and it's a great read, and it basically just says that this time it's real, and it looks at all of the limits as well. It looks at the limits of ChatGPT. So it says, well, it's real, but Google's got time. That's pretty much what it's saying.
I mean, it's got more than time. I mean, the idea, it's still not entirely clear what post search looks like if it's being driven by ChatGPT. I mean, we're still 5-10 years away from that, do you think?
Well, his point, this is his point. OpenAI is going to make the internet worse for a while because it's wrong too many times, but it is going to end up with a paradigm shift.
Yeah. Well, these are the times you talked about me being a curmudgeon. I'm actually rather cheerful now. When things are dark, bleak, that cheers me up. What about startup of the week? Surprise, surprise. One of our old chestnuts, a company. This is the corporate version of Paul Graham, seems to always come up, Keith, and that was the week.
And the reason is they keep shipping new code with new features, so you can't knock them, really. They're working.
Substack, that is, of course, one of Keith's biggest loves.
Yeah. So Substack is it has spoken about quite a lot of new features this week. However, some of those features have been around for a few weeks already. So this is more of a PR push by them. Private Substacks is the core of it, which is kind of an interesting concept. It's like a closed user group with writing or video at the core, or audio for that matter.
Yeah, I don't really understand why you would have. It's not like they're so public anyway. What's the benefit of a private group?
Well, then you could use it in an enterprise context, for example, for a product development team. where the outside world is not welcome.
What do they offer that you couldn't use the sort of typical? I don't know. I don't see the benefits of that.
Well, I think what you're going to see, think of this as a bus journey where this is the first bus stop. And it's great that you can get on the bus, but actually the bus is going somewhere. And where it's going, if you look at these features, is it really seems to want to turn into the canvas on which almost any conversation happens.
Well, that's very ambitious.
Yeah, but I think
it also seems to be a sharp shift away from what it was, or what I thought of Substack as a place where creatives can distribute their product and be paid for it.
I think that
I suspect that such a sharp shift from their original journey, that talking about the bus, isn't necessarily good news for Substack. It doesn't fit into what else they're doing. Why don't they focus on their core mission, which is providing a platform for creatives to earn a living?
So let me give you an example. So this is the Signal Rank. We launched our website this week. This is the logged in investor version of our website. And it's super valuable because it has a live list of B rounds happening that we have access to. So, real money can flow through this. And it has the long list that I mentioned earlier of 1,200 candidates. And you can see that 15 companies joined this list in the last 30 days. Why am I showing this? One of my thoughts this week when I saw the Substack announcement is, I could make a private Substack for people who pay me $50,000 a year that just puts these company names every week into a private company.
Okay. No, that makes a bit more sense. So it's a way for businesses to monetize what they're trying to do.
Yeah.
Well, we'll see. I'm not convinced. Finally, tweet of the week, Keith.
Tweet of the week.
Of course, it's an Elon Musk related one. We couldn't have a show without mentioning Elon.
We couldn't. So tweet of the week is, it's been well shared, this tweet. It's a guy called Dave Rubin who writes something called the Rubin Report. If we click on the original, you'll kind of see it's got 41,000 likes and been retweeted 8,000 times. Now it's got 59,000 likes and has been retweeted 11,000 times. This guy was a critic of Musk, and Musk invited him into Twitter to spend a couple of hours, usually at midnight, apparently. And this is a long Twitter thread about what he found out by being there, starting as a skeptic. It's a compelling read because it's an insight from a critic who became less of a critic by engaging with what's actually going on there. So I thought is actually a really good thing to share for anyone who's wondering what's going on at Twitter. It's the insider view of what's
So what exactly is happening at Twitter? Is Musk?
He's basically
turning the ship, turning the tanker.
Well, so what Musk has discovered is that Twitter was basically a massive engine dedicated to erasing content that it found unsavory, mainly for political reasons. So a very small part of Twitter was any longer promoting discussion and concepts. Most of the code was to get rid of things.
Yeah.
Most of the people were doing that. So it became a huge editorial engine sitting on top of a torrent of inbound stuff. And what Musk is trying to do is strip it all out. Yesterday, Musk went on the record and said, we might have to actually get rid of the entire code base and write it back from scratch because it's so built in that Twitter is basically a slightly left of center editor, that you can't actually fix it.
Yeah, and then you can think to yourself, well, why didn't he could have just done that without spending $45 billion.
Exactly right. which although he wouldn't have had the 300 million users a week audience, so at least.
Does anyone really at this point though care about Twitter, Keith?
I think people do. I do. I mean, I can't tell what other people think, but it
seems so archaic now, so old-fashioned, so yesterday.
Well, it's the first place I publish that was every week. After Substack, I put it on Twitter. Why? Because thousands and thousands of people see it, and some people like it. Some people come and subscribe to That Was the Week because of it. It's way better than Facebook or LinkedIn at that. Still.
Yeah. Well, Facebook. Yeah, I mean, you can't. Facebook's dead. LinkedIn is a bit specialized. Why don't you just put it on TikTok?
By the way, I almost put Malik's tweet in as tweet of the week this week. He had this tweet. You know, this whole discussion we've had about, well, the problem with Twitter is it's centralized.
Yeah.
And the Mastodon people are attacking it for that. And Malik tweeted, you know, software can only work if it's centralized. No one's ever built decentralized software. The internet is decentralized at the level of infrastructure, and anyone can put up a router and a modem and become a node on the internet. It's fully decentralized and federated. But there's no one ever said software built on the internet has to be like that. And if you think about it, you know, marketing and product development require centralization. So Twitter being centralized really is not a damning point. And I thought Ohm really nailed it. So I retweeted his tweet and replied to it as well. So I think Twitter I think Mastodon is going to die well before Twitter dies.
Well, I don't think it was ever alive. I mean,
yeah,
Mastodon sounds like a unicorn. Maybe its fate is the same of all the unicorns as we began. All the unicorns are dying. Mastodon was born dead. And there's a word for that, isn't there?
Yeah, it sounds like a Bruce Springsteen song, Born Dead.
Born Dead. Well, next week will be February, Keith. We'll be back February the 3rd, 2023. That was the week, an interesting week, particularly, I think, on the Microsoft Azure OpenAI stuff. I think that's really interesting and provocative. So have a great week, and we will see you all next week, February the 3rd.
Bye, everyone.
Friday next week.
Yep.
I've got sunshine on a cloud.